If I were Obama, I would make education binational, or by that I mean encourage kind of this bilateral crossover between students who study in the US, like myself, and opportunities for them to have an immersion experience in Mexico, and vice versa for high-achieving Mexican students.
If I were Obama, I would encourage and push for more open conversation between students, college students, and politicians and policymakers, just to really get that open conversation about our talents, our accomplishments, as well as our concerns.
If I were Obama, I would probably invest more in pre-college engineering programs to keep the engineering rate higher.
If I were Obama, I would increase and promote educational and research development programs bilaterally for creating innovation and the effects of it that are productivity and jobs.
If I were Obama, I would move beyond simply recognizing the importance of investing in education for future generations, and I would actually take action. I would move to implement policies that improve the quality of education in the United States, but also to recognize that Mexican students are also important to the global economy, and truly invest in giving them opportunities here in the States to learn things that maybe aren't available in Mexico.
If I were Obama, I would stop the cuts in the budget for science in the US and encourage Mexico-US collaboration in science and technology. I think that investing in science is investing in both of the country's future.
If I were Obama, I would encourage the high-risk investment on sustainable projects designed by young Mexicans.
If I were Obama, I would implement policies that would help push the drive and innovation to the south.
If I were Obama, I would focus on foreign investment for Mexican companies in order to create more technology and innovation in Mexico to benefit both the investments in the United States and the opportunities created in Mexico.
If I were Obama, I would be learning Spanish because I think it's pretty amazing the level of integration of an NAFTA market, but it's also pretty crucial for a US president to actually communicate with the Hispanic people in the United States and Mexico, and it also works for the rest of Latin America.
If I were Obama, I would immediately recognize the failure of the war on drugs in Mexico. I believe that militarizing society and capturing drug lords is not the solution, but rather rechanneling these funds into social programs that integrate excluded youth into their communities is.
If I were Obama, I would eliminate the punitive drug trafficking policies towards Mexico in exchange for building stronger education, social programs, and community.
Even though the United States has been aiding Mexico in the battle against organized crime, I think that its commitment and its efforts sometimes appear to be misguided or half-hearted at best. So if I were Obama, I would definitely step up my game and place bilateral cooperation on drug policy with Mexico on top of the agenda.
Yeah, if I were Obama, I would stop the war on drugs and I would help Mexico bring justice to the 60,000 people who have been murdered here.
Also, on gun policy, I would make clear that there is not an absolute right for bearing military arms and assault rifles, and that those rights are less important than the right to live.
If I were Obama, I'd try to shift the focus of the debate in the United States from their local issues into more international issues. I think they're too self-centered in their debate and they're too important to do that.
If I were Obama, I would promote dialogue and cooperation between border cities.
I would like to see our populations safer, happier, and wealthier.
If I were Obama, I would pay more attention to the US-Mex relationship, specifically in the immigration area. I think that immigration restrictions are obstacles to overcome common problems.
One of the big disconnects I see that's causing a lot of problems, or really stopping a lot of problems from being solved, is the lack of communication between the people who are really in touch with underprivileged communities, who live there, who understand their issues, and really some of the brightest people in the world who have great intentions but just don't understand the issues. NGOs have a lot of great networks, but there are not a lot of connections that are really on the same level as what you have in academia and in industry, and I'd really like to see that connection bridged. So if I were President Obama, I would try to set up a better connection between those groups.
If I were Obama, I would bet on cleaner energies and more sustainable projects. I believe that the future requires of all of us to take care of our home, of our environment, and that's a vital issue.
What I could do is run a campaign on massive and social media, promoting the cooperation, understanding, and the solidarity between the USA and Mexico. Mexico needs the USA to accelerate its economy, and the USA needs Mexico to speed up the understanding of the cultural, economic, political, and social changes that drives its new demographies.
If I were Obama, I could consider that strengthened relations in Mexico would probably give the United States the opportunity to improve economic growth and also to improve security within our both countries.
If I were Obama, I would just make more of a visual presence, and that's it. It doesn't require any bills passed through the Congress. It doesn't require any extra funding. It just requires having conversations with Mexican and Mexican-American leaders. That sends a strong signal, and that's something that I think the Democratic Party and Obama could really benefit from, and it's something that the Republican Party is really looking into doing.
I'd like to say to President Obama that we believe in you. We still think you're a message of hope. We do think you're capable enough and you have the leadership to conduct the United States of America and this relationship to what it needs to evolve. So that's it.